from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Pedro. This house is in session. I wish to acknowledge the presence of Kinari Linton, 7 years old, a student of Wesley Hall Jr. Kizara Linton, 9 years old, a student of Wesley Hall Jr. Josiah Herod, 7 years old, a student of Hinesbury Primary. Zachary Walcott, 8 years old, a student of Eagle Hall Primary, and Najee Clark, 10 years old, a student of St. George Primary. And they are accompanied by Jamila Joseph Lord, the mother of Josiah Herod. I hope all of you have a phenomenal day in Parliament where you get to understand and appreciate what goes on in this democracy. I hope you enjoy the day's sitting.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Speaker.
Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, October 26, 2021, and Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, to be confirmed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
Beg to second that.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General, petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I beg your leave to give notice of the following private members' resolution. Be it resolved that this Honorable the House of Assembly takes note of the statement laid by the Honorable Minister of Finance in this House on 20th September 2021 in the matter of the National Vaccination Fund and Barbados' acquisition of vaccines.
Notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Barbados Metrology Bill 2021 and the first reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2021.
Questions that the aforementioned bill be read the first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 1, sir. In the name of the Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the second reading of the Customs Bill 2021.
Honorable Member Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And before we begin, sir, I want to signal to the young visitors in the chamber that part of what we will be discussing today relates not just to what the government is doing to make it easier with respect to the clearance of goods in this country, but strategically, sir, how do we reposition this country to move forward and to assure that the public policy that we have implemented, sir, for the past 55 years, that we are indeed in a position to deliver, not just for our generation, but certainly for theirs. Mr. Speaker, this bill before the House really is one of the very critical reforms as it relates to the Customs Department. And I will try to preface my remarks, sir, given our young visitors, to try to explain through you, sir, to them and the rest of the country, effectively what the Customs Department, what they do, what the officers of the Customs Department do on a daily basis, in the interests of all Barbadians, sir, including themselves. But certainly, sir, to give the context within which this bill is before the House today, given all that has transpired in Barbados, sir, over the last few years. The reality is, sir, is that the Customs Department is one of the major revenue collecting agencies for the country. But they do so, sir, in the context of working with members of the private sector to ensure, sir, that on the one hand, that the country is protected, and protected meaning, sir, that we are in a position to work with other members of law enforcement to assure Barbadians that the security of this country will always be a priority, and that the importation, or for that matter, exportation, sir, of any illegal guns, any illicit contraband, sir, that those things are kept in check and they work with the various agencies to so do. But equally, sir, the Customs Department works every day to try to facilitate business and the conduct of trade in this country. And whilst I know for many out there, sir, as we approach the Yuletide season, Christmas season, and there is the usual, sir, the usual activity that will take place within the context of the Bridgetown port in terms of the clearance of barrels, as well as packages, sir, at the various warehouses. I know that that is what Barbadians, when they listen to me this morning, sir, would be most concerned with, and the extent to which the Customs Department, sir, over the last few years has been working to improve its own internal operations, but as we have been doing, sir, working with the private sector so that they too can improve their service delivery, such that the average Barbadian, sir, whether you're a business person or whether you're just someone who is bringing in packages or barrels from overseas, that the entire process, sir, can be facilitated as smoothly as possible, and that the appropriate amount of revenue is collected at the border, because I say to the young people in the chamber that providing education free at the cost of delivery, sir, providing healthcare, sir, free at the cost of delivery, the maintenance, sir, of the maintenance of a law enforcement infrastructure, sir, which relies on the Royal Barbados Police Force, the prison service, sir, the fire service I include in that spectrum, sir, along with the defense force, that these all represent, sir, collective services which all of us will avail ourselves at some point, and without which a country, sir, simply will not be capable of functioning. And therefore, the policy that successive governments have implemented, the work of the Customs Department as a revenue agency helps to finance or pay for the delivery of these collective services, as well as a whole host of other services that the government offers. And therefore, it is an important discussion, and I know that the time will come later, early in the year, sir, with respect to the new constitution. But the point is, sir, that Barbados has developed over the years because we've been able to properly finance, sir, the delivery of these services, such that I hope that someday, perhaps, and hope that through my very motivational words, that these youngsters may very well find themselves at some point in the future being employees, sir, of the Customs Department, because they too want to get on the front line and help to protect Barbados, as well as to provide opportunities and the framework for opportunities for all Barbadians. Now, sir, let me take the opportunity to state that my relationship with the Customs Department, sir, started 3.5 years ago, officially, I should say that is, in this context. And it has been, sir, I would have to say a labor of love, sir, with the Customs Department. Because prior to us taking office, sir, you would recall, there was a lot of rancor, sir, in the public as to whether or not the Customs Department will be subsumed within the Barbados Revenue Authority, sir. Effectively was a stalemate. And that stalemate, sir, resulted in a lack of implementation with respect to the very critical reform agenda that was required of the Customs Department, and equally, sir, of the Revenue Authority at the, as it was formed, which spilled over into the management of the public finances. That's the best way I can put it, sir. The polite way I can put it today. And as a result of that inertia, sir, the morale of the department dropped, as you could appreciate, sir, because there was pretty much little attention being placed on the department itself. And I personally, sir, met with all of the sections of the department as we went through this exercise, not just as it relates to legislation, but, sir, as it relates to how do we change a culture, not just within the context of the department, but a culture as it relates to the wider operational, the wider operations for which customs is a very central pillar. And one of the very critical things that clearly was required, sir, was that we have officers within the context of the Customs Department with a wide range of experience, sir. But in a lot of cases, the tools within which to leverage that experience, sir, was missing. And regrettably, as you know, sir, you can only tinker for so long with the equipment or the support that you have. And Barbados had reached a point, sir, where the Customs Department needed, for lack of a better term, sir, reform badly. Nothing to do with the fault of any of the officers within the context of the department, but really, sir, leadership at the political level, at the governmental level, sir, with respect to the strategic direction of the department. And I would like to believe, sir, that in being elected 3.5 years ago, that this government brought the kind of leadership that was required at the time with respect to not just the Customs Department, but certainly for the country, but certainly as it relates to the Customs Department, to allow us to be in a position to be here this morning, sir, not just to table this bill, because this is just this one critical element, yes, but one of many, sir, 41 specifically identified reforms for customs that really and truly, sir, needed to be implemented maybe 10 years ago. But regrettably, because of the lack of implementation, sir, we've had to accelerate a lot of timelines, and that really has put a lot of pressure on the department itself. And I want to thank the officers of the department for stepping up in extraordinary circumstances, because it has not been easy, sir, with respect to responding to what clearly were long-standing issues of the department, whilst trying to put and resolve, sir, new issues for looking to the future and trying to transition, sir, because at the end of the day, people trust that you will honor your word. And we have tried as far as possible, sir, to do so as quickly as possible as it relates to some of the internal administration of the department, sir. And we will continue to work with that, sir, because at the end of the day, the department, like all other departments of government, sir, operate within the context of the wider civil service. And whilst we would all like to see things happen overnight, the reality is that, not an excuse, sir, but the reality is that you have to work within the confines as it is with respect to some of the internal administration, but equally, sir, as you will well know, the circumstances within which we found the country when we came to office were extraordinarily difficult. Of course, that has been made worse with respect to the onset of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic last year. But we continue, sir, to just chip away at the reforms within the Customs Department, because we feel very strongly that those reforms will bring accelerated benefit once all of the various stakeholders we can get past this pandemic, and not just the department is in a position to service the public, but that the introduction of a range of standard operating procedures, sir, as well as some internal administrative guidelines would enhance the way that the department is perceived. And I'm happy to report, sir, that some of the feedback that I have had from the private sector, and they've said to me quite plainly, Minister, that the difference between the Customs Department today and the Customs Department from 3 years ago is chalk and cheese, sir. And I take that feedback, sir, for what it's worth, because having been involved with the private sector, sir, prior to entering public life, I know of the challenges that the members of the private sector may have experienced in working with the Customs Department at the time. But having come into public office, sir, and interacting with the officers themselves and getting to understand the internal dynamics between what was taking place within the Customs Department, and officers in some instances who moved over to the BRA, for example, sir, felt that they had no choice with respect to doing that, and those that chose to stay, sir, felt as if they were being disadvantaged or being spited, sir, with respect to their decision. And the truth is, sir, that as we all know, perception becomes reality, regrettably, if there's no intervention to show people that their contribution matters. And this government, sir, has worked particularly hard to try to motivate officers to choose a path of positive reform, sir, that redounds to the benefit of the country. And I really thank the officers of the Customs Department for responding in extraordinary circumstances, sir. We are not yet done because we have had some setbacks as it relates, as I say, sir, to COVID. But the reality is that this critical department of government, sir, is on course for completing the reform agenda. We would all love it to be completed as quickly as possible, sir. But in the interest of getting a number of matters right and the ability to implement swiftly, sir, I can report that to the country that a lot of the concerns that were raised as it relates to security have been addressed, sir, both at the Bridgetown port as well as the airport, sir. And to the extent that the department now is in a position, sir, to mine some of the data with respect to what has been collected, sir, that the intelligence gathering capability of the department certainly has been enhanced. I won't say too much on that, sir, but I'm signaling formally to the country that a lot has changed for the positive as it relates to security at those specific institutions as ports of entry. And I believe that Barbadians can feel a little more comfortable that this government, sir, responded very, very, very quickly to be able to put the various pieces of infrastructure in place to allow the Customs Department as well as the other law enforcement agencies, sir, to address that very critical matter of the public safety, sir, with respect to illegal guns. Of course, sir, one must always be vigilant, and I commend the officers for conducting the training, getting the various pieces of equipment operational, sir, such that we can give the members of the public confidence that we have done what we can do, sir, in the circumstances to first and foremost, sir, respond to that very serious matter. Now, sir, as it relates to the staffing, and I know that this has been an ongoing challenge, not just for the department, but certainly critical other departments across government. We have been in the process, sir, as we have introduced technology, looking to see how do we redeploy, sir, staff of the department with the introduction of technology, sir, and the supported training to try to assess the reforms that we have implemented against the context, sir, of any future recruitment. It is in no doubt, sir, that obviously the staff of the Customs Department is a mature staff, sir, and we will be addressing the recruitment very aggressively, sir, over the next 18 months. But it is with a view, sir, that the interventions that we are making from a technological side, sir, that the demands of a customs officer in the future, sir, will be very different from that of a customs officer 20 or 25 years ago. And that is not to say that there's anything wrong with the customs officer of 25 years ago. The reality is the amount of information and the amount of compliance as I said, sir, as products change very quickly, sir, there are more and more demands on the Customs Department, particularly as part of the wider regulatory body, sir, that interact at ports of entry, that there are more and more demands on customs officers going forward to be able to respond to the needs of the public. And it is within that context, sir, that we have been focused on, and the bill addresses some of it in the context of moving towards the introduction, well, we've already transitioned, but moving towards more and more post-clearance audits, sir, which will become a feature more and more as we move forward. But the only way that we can do that, sir, is if we have the systems in place that allows us to be able to, as my grandmother would say, sir, trust, but verify. And that is important, sir, as we seek to provide better business facilitation, better trade facilitation in the context of a global environment, which clearly is quite disruptive. But the reality is, we can only make things easier, sir, easier, if we have the confidence that in so doing, that those objectives that I identified very early on are met as it relates to security, and that the revenue component, sir, is doing what it's supposed to do, and that the businesses or persons engaged in the system, sir, that they are compliant, sir, and part of the focus of the Customs Department, sir, going forward will be a critical emphasis on compliance, encouraging people to do the right thing, sir, up front, explain to them the administrative and make it as easy as possible for them to do the right thing. And I say so as these young students are listening to me, sir, that you do the right thing up front. And if you do the right thing up front every time, then you don't need to be concerned about any enforcement. And that is very, very, very important, because, and I say this in all sincerity, sir, if you, and I say you, sir, the proverbial you, of course, if you, sir, determine that you are going to declare on your entry, sir, that you are bringing in parts of some nature, sir, and we trust you to say that you are bringing in parts, sir, but then when it comes to do the post-clearance side of it, sir, we realize that you ain't got a part at your place to sell, sir, then the question becomes, what was it that you were importing? Because we have to trust, as part of this system going forward, is in part trusting people to do the right thing, so that the information that you supply to customs, or any government agency for that matter, is accurate, that you have in fact, sir, paid the appropriate duties or fees or whatever it is associated with it, sir, such that the post-clearance process becomes just, sir, almost like a rubber stamp. So if there is a discrepancy, sir, with respect to what you say you have brought in, but then you can't verify, sir, where you have bought it from to be able to sell it. And I give this example to just demonstrate, sir, that this is very serious. This is very serious because it has revenue implications, sir. It has revenue implications. And the extent to which revenue foregone, sir, revenue foregone means that the delivery of, or the quality of the kind of services that the government can provide will be diminished simply because we can't finance it properly. And therefore, as part of what we are trying to encourage all citizens, sir, all citizens to do, is to make sure that we do it right the first time. You do it right the first time, we have enough information, and oftentimes, sir, oftentimes you hear the government should do this, the government should do that, sir. And in engaging with the stakeholders, often the information is not forthcoming in a way that it should be. And to the extent that the department is collecting information, sir, the department can only go based on what is declared before it. Now, there's a process for if you make a false declaration, sir, and the bill certainly addresses some of those issues. But here's the thing, sir. The department only has a finite amount of resources, and it is our view that we have to deploy those resources, sir, as efficiently as possible. And therefore, if persons are compliant, sir, with all of the procedures, then it means then that, one, the post-clearance function becomes a relatively seamless and mundane exercise, because it will just verify what has happened. And then there's no need, sir, then to escalate towards enforcement. And the reality is that we would rather be in a position, sir, where we are dedicating resources to making it easier for people to conduct their business, not just with customs, but certainly with the entire government, make it as easy as possible to conduct their business, such that we don't have to dedicate resources for enforcement. And I believe, sir, that as we seek to work through the implementation of this bill, work through the implementation of the number of critical reforms for the Customs Department, that in working with the various stakeholders in the private sector, that we can in fact improve and enhance the internal processing of customs, such that we can give the country, sir, the confidence that, one, that the integrity of the system is intact, the integrity, sir, of the officers themselves, that is intact, sir, that the integrity of all those who are working within the context of any of these warehouses, whether it's the Bridgetown port, whether it's the airport, sir, whether it's any of the off-site warehouses, sir, that the integrity of the system, sir, is intact. So our mantra throughout this process, sir, will be trust, but verify. Trust, but verify, sir, because in changing a culture, sir, we feel that it is important that we make it easy, but you make it easy, sir, on the basis that we can trust each other. And without that trust, then you move towards an environment then that becomes adversarial, for lack of a better term, sir, which we don't want there to be an adversarial relationship between any department of government, far less customs, and the private sector. And therefore, our mantra, sir, is to be able to put the systems in place that gives certainty with respect to the conduct, and that there's no, there's very little discretion, sir, or room for arbitrary decision-making within the context of the operations of the Customs Department. It does not mean that a customs officer is not a customs officer, because if acting on intelligence, sir, and relevant supporting documents, the customs officer is empowered, sir, to deal with matters in a particular way, and given the nature of the infraction, sir, then obviously any penalties or administrative action can be taken relative to the nature of the matter. But our emphasis, sir, really is to create an environment where it is less adversarial, we focus on compliance, we build trust in the system, and trust meaning the operators in the system, sir, doing the right thing every time. And if a mistake happens, we'll own up to the mistake and say, or write to the controller of customs and say, well, look, this was submitted in error. You can clearly see that it was done so, and that there's an internal administrative process to be able to address some of these matters without escalating, sir, to a different level. But the reality is, sir, is that it will take some time to be able to work through with all of the stakeholders, and most of them are already on board, sir, but to work through with the various stakeholders what would be the benefits, sir, with respect to achieving 100% compliance, and we hope that we can do so, sir, working with all of the stakeholders, and allow then the Customs Department the luxury, I should say, sir, of being able then to focus on working certainly with the Ministry of Foreign Trade in helping to advance some of those opportunities that we want to see, sir, being created, such that these young Barbadians who are here in the chamber with us today, that if they have a brilliant idea and we get the financing in place and we can get things done right here in Barbados, sir, that this customs bill that we are passing today and the reforms that we are implementing across the department, that they are in a position that once they can get their product to market, sir, that they're in a position to help export, build growth opportunities for themselves and their peers, sir, and be able then to be part of the earnings infrastructure, sir, for the country. And I think that is one of the things, sir, that I'm going to spend some time on a little later, because whilst a lot of the discussion, as I said at the very beginning, for most people listening to me, sir, they just want to know how long it takes them to get their package out of, whether it is any of the couriers, sir, how long it takes them to get the barrel out of the port, sir. And that is important, critically important, and we will address those. We have been addressing those matters, particularly in the midst of a pandemic. But that cannot be the only focus, sir. Because if that is the only focus, then it means that these young people that are here with us this morning, and those that I hope will be inspired to not just perhaps join the Customs Department in the future, but equally to want to become a part of the trade and logistics profession in the country, that as we seek to reposition Barbados, sir, to become a true transshipment hub, that the opportunities, not just within customs, but the opportunities within the wider industry that customs is at the center of, sir, that we need people to be able to bring the vision to reality, secure whatever financing is required, and you can't do everything on your own, sir, so you may need support and investment from others, such that we are not just focusing on bringing stuff into Barbados, but we are also sending the containers, rather than sending the containers back out empty, sir, that they're going back out with Barbadian-made goods and items, going not just to the Caribbean, but right across the world, sir. And as this government has been embarking on establishing relations with Latin America, with Africa, sir, with the Middle East, that we have to see ourselves as not just looking to bring stuff from the United States and Europe, but there are markets out there, sir, that we can send our stuff to. And again, there are other markets other than the United States and Europe. And therefore, the capacity that we need to build out with respect to our exports, there are real opportunities within that space. And this bill is intended to help open up and make it easier for those persons who will be exporting, sir, that we can expand and allow for greater facilitation, and that the country, sir, can start to earn a little more, container by container, sir, box by box, earn a little more with respect to being able to earn more foreign exchange. And so in a real sense, the reforms within customs forms part of the overarching strategic policy, sir, for how we reposition Barbados as a transshipment hub, but equally to provide opportunities to make it as easy as possible for any young person who has an idea, who may wish to create their opportunities in Barbados, and to be able, sir, to export said goods to wherever in the world. And the Customs Department is positioning itself to be able to facilitate that. So, in a real sense, we are on the road, sir. We are on the road with respect to the reforms in customs. But I take this particular point, at this particular junction, sir, to speak very quickly to what is part 3 of the bill, sir. The Customs Automated Control System. And the reason I start there is because when we came to office, sir, in 2018. We took all the debriefs from the various departments and the ministry. And whilst this is a very short section, it is a very important section, sir. And it is particularly critical that I raise this at this point. And it speaks to the customs automated control system, sir. Now, members of the public, sir, have heard about this thing called Asikuda, sir. And the truth is, sir, to the average person, it means absolutely nothing to them. Nothing at all. Right, sir? Nothing at all. And the reality is, Barbados was the first country in the region to implement something called Asikuda++. This was way back in 2005. I'm sure none of these, you said 7 and 8, sir. I think the ages that you called were 7 and 8 and 9. So obviously none of these children here were born when Barbados was the first in the region, sir, in 2005 to implement Asikuda++. And at the time, that was certainly clearly Barbados led. Therefore, that's what we were accustomed to. So the message I want to leave, I want to leave specifically with these young people is that Barbados always leads. And no matter what you do, no matter what you do in your life, Barbados always leads. So we introduced this thing called Asikuda++ in 2005, sir, first in the region, with the support of UNTAD. And when we came to office, sir, as you know, as we all know with technology, when you reach a point, sir, where the support for the technology is no longer done by the entities that develop it, because there are always upgrades, and you guys know about upgrades. You know more about upgrades than I do. But the reality is, sir, when we came to office, there had already been deployed across the region Asikuda World, sir. And the difference between Asikuda++ and Asikuda World, sir, and I look at the members of the customs officials that are here, and I recall telling them when we did our various tours of the various customs offices that there was simply, sir, too much paper in the offices of customs, too much paper. And even if and with that paper, sir, one, it really didn't lead to a healthy environment, because with all that paper catching dust, sir, somebody can get sinuses and asthma and all kinds of things. The air quality just was not very good. So one of the very critical things that we did when we realized, sir, that we were the last then in the region to implement Asikuda, it really motivated me, sir, to implement Asikuda World, not just as a matter of pride, sir, because I want these youngsters to realize that you must take pride, sir, in everything that you do. You must take pride. I haven't been the first in the region to introduce ++. Being the last to implement Asikuda World, to me, it was not a good feeling, sir, because Barbados has always been on the cutting edge of leadership, and we must be, at all costs, sir, ensure that we continue to lead within this space. And we met with UNCTAD, sir, the members of UNCTAD, in March of 2019. They brought us up to speed with respect to all that had transpired, sir. And we gave a very clear commitment that come September 2019, sir, my grandmother, sir, we use the word come hell or high water, but we determined, sir, that come September 2019, that we were going to implement Asikuda World in this country. It was not a matter of being arrogant or anything, but the reality is that we must believe in ourselves that we can execute, because the context in which we were coming into, they had started to develop this notion in Barbados that there was something called implementation deficit disorder. And I said to the officers of customs at the time that I reject that concept completely, and that the department was going to implement this system, if only, sir, as a matter of pride, but certainly, sir, to ensure that we put a lot of the long-standing issues that were affecting the officers themselves in the execution of their tasks with respect to all of that paper that were laying around the offices, and ever so often, you're talking about air quality and all these types of things, sir. Plus, too, sir, the reality is this. If you have thousands of papers, sir, stacked up all around, imagine in here, sir, there's paper, not everywhere, but most places, and people working in between it. For an officer to have to go and retrieve that documentation, sir, it would have been impossible, nigh impossible. And it really made little sense to continue with that. Plus, too, the support that was being offered for the system was no longer going to be there. So it really, again, sir, made little sense. But we worked with all of the stakeholders, sir. We worked with the Bridgetown Port, obviously the internal stakeholders with internal to the Customs Department. We worked with the Ministry of Innovation and Smart Science and Smart Technology, sir. We work with the Chamber of Commerce. We work with all of the customs brokers, sir. We work with all of the ships agents, sir. All of the people who were involved in this thing. And the truth is, sir, I'm not sure at the time that they felt that we were serious. Because even though we had the engagements and what have you, part of what had set in, sir, was a certain apathy. A certain apathy at the time. Because previously, we had attempted, I say we, government, had attempted to do these things and failed to deliver. And it really had been 4 or 5 years since this thing was intended to be done, but it wasn't done, sir. And I recall, sir, and the consultant from Untitled is here with us this morning, and I remember when we met and we went through every week, sir, every week, I swear I was a customs officer. I think I could make a half-decent customs officer, but the staff said I will have to apply and see what happened. But we met every week, sir. We went through all of the technical details with the stakeholders and what have you. And I recall there was a tropical storm coming the end of August, sir. The implementation was supposed to be September 1st. And the team that were supposed to come in, they had missed their flight in Miami, so we had to push back just 1 week. So I recall at the time getting some feedback when we made the announcement that we had to push the launch date back 1 week, sir. In spite of all of the work that we had done up until then to give people confidence that we will be doing this thing, I remember some of the feedback, sir, then was, you see what I tell you? They mean, they ain't gonna do this thing. And in spite of all of the assurances that we gave, sir, as government that we were going to do this thing, there was still doubt because of past experience. And I said, well, these are the circumstances. Anyhow, the officers landed, and we were able to do the last set of technical specifications to launch on September 9th, sir. Now, what was interesting at the time, sir, and context is always everything. For the first time, from the broker, sir, to the customs officer, for the first time, they were able to do everything, sir, seamlessly, no paper at all involved with respect to anything, for the first time. But one of the things that we heard initially, sir, and as you know, one of the interesting things at the time was because some of the participants, even though they were involved in the build-up and the potential rollout, some of them were still of the view that it wasn't going to happen, sir. So when we turn off plus and turn on World, sir, everybody was taken. Let's say everybody, not everybody, but as far as the public was concerned, it may have been perceived that everybody was taken by surprise. But what the surprise was is that the government actually did it. And I really want to commend the team that worked on the Asakuda World project, because it has been, sir, as I said, a labor of love. It literally has changed, sir, the way that we process things. Now, as I said, I know the members of the public who have no interaction right now, sir, may not connect with it. Or if they do, they connect with it because their broker or somebody asks them to send them the invoice, which is loaded into Asecuda, so that the customs officer, at any time, sir, can log on to the system, review the documentation that has been presented, and based on what we have been able to introduce by way of risk management, sir, which you can see is the next section of the bill, that the Customs Department now, over the last 2 years, sir, has been working to compile all of the data that we've been collecting as part of this process to be able to further refine the risk management that Customs will pursue to allow for greater facilitation through the ports of entry. Now, this is critically important because, sir, it means that the processing time for containers and all these things, sir, really have come down with respect to customs. What now is, and I know that somebody in the private sector are still having challenges on their side, because whilst customs had improved its infrastructure, some of the private sector had not kept pace with what customs has been doing. Certainly during that period in 2019, they bring us to where we were. And some have completed, but some still remain to be completed as it relates to the private sector. But why is this important? Why do I take the time to say this, sir? Because for the public, in September 2019, there was some, and I say it to the youngsters, is that you will hear stuff in public all the time. It is not always the complete picture. But in September 2019, as we turn off Asecuda Plus and turn on Asecuda World, there was generally regarded in some quarters as being negative, because even though they had gone through the process, they were not ready mentally, sir, to be able to, for the switch, even though it was 4 or 5 years behind. Now, fast forward, sir, 6 months. Fast forward 6 months, sir. 6 months. 7 months, actually. And COVID-19 hit, sir. And the feedback that we then got from the wider business community as it relates to the impact that not having, sir, to submit physical documentation to customs meant that had we not completed that implementation of Asecuda World in September 2019, sir, if people, and given that there were lockdowns and all kinds of things taking place, sir, even though there was still provision for persons to do some of those things, and we were still working through how customs was going to operate and how the port was going to operate and all these things, sir, because we had made that very significant intervention, sir, in September 2019, it meant that even though there was disruption, sir, with respect to the overall process, the Customs Department, all of the stakeholders, from the customs brokers, the shippers, all of the people involved, sir, were still able to function because the Asecuda World system, sir, the automated, well, it says here in Clause 17, automation of data processing, sir, was complete, such that customs was still in a position to be able to process the entries, sir, and allow for goods to be cleared at a time, sir, where we were all unsure as to where the pandemic was going to take us. So I say that to say to the country, sir, and to the young visitors here, that you have to believe, sir, in yourself, in what you are doing, because none of us in September 2019, sir, knew what was going to happen in 2020. As a matter of fact, we were all getting ready to gather. And we were gathering, sir, in 2020. We were gathering. That was our intent in 2020. And rather than gather, we had to separate, sir, in order to protect ourselves. And we did not know at the time how critical that intervention was. But I want to thank again, sir, the department for sticking, sir, through what clearly was a tough time, because it cannot be stressed enough, sir, that as officers operating on the public's behalf, we are all human beings too, and we have our families to look after. And I really want to thank the officers for continuing to ride out what clearly has been a very stressful environment for all of us with this COVID environment, and they have responded to ensure that we can keep things flowing as best we can. And that really is the kind of commitment, sir, that I would like to think that our young visitors can emulate, because when your country needs you more, sir, you have to show up. And I really want to thank the officers of the Customs Department for being able to do that and allow the country to continue to function as normal, sir, within the context of this COVID environment. So we will continue, sir, to provide the training, to provide the support for the Customs Department, all of the other persons within the process. But we still have, through the implementation of the electronic single window, sir, to bring a number of the other government agencies on the same level of customs, such that the risk management that I referred to, which is referred to in the context of Part 4, the risk management, sir, that as we make it easy for people to clear goods out of the various ports and warehouses and what have you, that we do so in a manner, sir, that reflects the associated risk involved. And the only way we can do that is if all the agencies are pretty much on the same page, because whilst we accept, sir, that we would never want a plant virus or some animal virus to come into the country, we still have to be very clear about our risk management and information that is provided, because oftentimes you would hear customs, somebody message me, or any of persons in here will bring to my attention that customs got my goods stick up. When they check, it's not customs. There's another reason for the stick up. But of course, as far as people are concerned, sir, it's customs, because customs name easy to call. Just like, sir, finance's name is easy to call sometimes. But in this process, customs as the central agency is working with other agencies to assure the public that their safety is important, because at the end of the day, and it goes back to trust, sir. If you find something, and they say to these youngsters, everything that you see on the internet cheap ain't necessarily good. So if people source things on the basis that it is just cheap, when it gets here and it does not satisfy the quality and the standards that are required to get onto the market, which is intended to protect you and your family, sir, because food is a very serious thing. So the standards that are required for food safety is important. So everything that cheap ain't necessarily good, and we have officers that work alongside customs to assure the public that the standards of and quality of any food item, or for that matter, medicines, or anything that comes into the country, sir, that as that regulatory environment is important, that it is followed. Now, the truth is, sir, there's no customs officer that I'm aware of that is trained in plant health or veterinary services or medicine, so therefore we rely on the expertise of other government agencies to support the Customs Department. And therefore, as persons are seeking to import stuff, that is why I know the Honourable Member for St. James Central, his ministry, the Commerce Department, is working alongside Customs to implement what is known as the electronic single window. That our intention is to make it as easy as possible for you or anybody to know what is required to meet the standards for bringing items into the country. So you just don't go on the internet, sir, see something and bring it in, and then when they get here, then realize, oh, I should have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because if you do it afterwards, sir, then all that does is to delay the checks and the verification, and therefore, as I said at the very beginning, compliance, sir, is really where we want to put the emphasis with respect to all of these procedures, because more importantly than businesses being able to make money is to assure the public health of all Barbadians. And therefore, the regulatory agencies that are involved in the process, whether it is officers from the Ministry of Health, whether it's officers from the Ministry of Agriculture, specifically as it relates to those food matters, then we are operating within the context of a regulatory environment. But we are working to get those systems upgraded within those departments to get them on par with respect to customs, sir. And we are confident that in so doing, that we will be able to further enhance the processing times with respect to the clearance of these items. Now, the truth is, Mr. Speaker, all of this is predicated on the economic agents, as I refer to them, sir, the persons importing, those persons, sir, understanding clearly what is their role in the process, such that the information that they pass to their customs broker or any agent acting on their behalf, sir, that we all operate, sir, above board with respect to provision of information, because not just the customs officer, but all of the other officers that are involved in the clearance process would see the information that you provide the same time once the single window effectively is completed, the same time, such that rather than it being a sequential process, that officers looking at the same information at the same time, rather than it going from this ministry, rather than something going from commerce, then to agriculture, then to health, then to, well, maybe back to commerce, come to finance, then goes to foreign affairs, all that will be a thing of the past, sir. All of the relevant information will be seen by the officers simultaneously, is the intention, sir, such that the length of time that it takes to be able to deal with matters will be reduced considerably, and therefore we will be able then to enhance the risk management with respect to a number of these features. So these are things, sir, that are still in the works with respect to reforms, but Barbados can take the confidence that customs will continue its own reform agenda and will continue to forge ahead, sir, with respect to its own internal operations. It will start to deploy officers more towards, as I said, post-clearance and getting those post-clearance audits completed, because that is where we now are transitioning to, such that, as I said, trust but verify, but we can allow persons then to do business as seamlessly as possible. But the only way that that can really happen is if the information, sir, that is provided actually matches what is on the ground. At any time there's a gap between the information provided and what you see in front of you, sir, then you know you've got a problem. And sir, as you know in your profession, sir, you go based on evidence. And if the evidence don't match the record, then there's certainly a process to be able to deal with that. Now, sometimes, sir, it is not necessarily criminal intent or anything at all of that nature, but we are working to ensure that the appropriate administrative, internal administrative procedures would be in place to accommodate these matters, and that there's a formality, sir, with that is certain with respect to being able to facilitate a number of these issues. Now, sir, as you know, we very early in this administration, we passed the Advanced Cargo Information System. We passed the Advanced Passenger Information System, Advanced Cargo Information Systems Bill, sir, Act, and the Advanced Passenger Information Systems Act. We did early on when we did the introduction of the kiosk. You recall, sir, the introduction of the kiosk at the airport, and to be able to facilitate those we have done already, and therefore those sections are codified again here for the benefit of customs as the entity working in on the one hand in conjunction with immigration as it relates to passengers, but certainly as it relates to cargo, working with in conjunction with the Bridgetown Port in relation to managing the marine vessels. Now, the standards are all goods that come into the country must have a declaration, okay, and it's clearly spelled out, sir, in Part 8 with respect to what is required for that. And obviously there's good reason, sir, because if you are not bringing it in formally, then that may be regarded as smuggling, sir. And smuggling is not something that I would want to encourage any young person to get involved with, because smuggling suggests that you're trying to avoid the responsibility that you have to the public. 2, you're avoiding the responsibility of making any various contributions to the tax state, which provides a whole set of goods and services for members of the public. So anytime you find yourself involved in anything that tries to avoid any of those matters, then it's just plain wrong. And the reality is, as we collect information, the information that is collected is designed for policy. And part of what we do, sir, is when we look at the data that's being collected from customs, we look at the data that's being collected at the Revenue Authority, as well as all the other agencies, sir. We then look and see where the different tariffs, in this instance, would be, the level of taxation, because at the end of the day, sir, if the government is unaware as to what is the true state of play, then you can't adjust your overall tax policy and your revenue raising measures accordingly. So therefore, as part of what we are working to have done is persons are willingly submitting the right information, sir, not just the customs, but certainly all of the regulatory agencies, such that from a policy perspective, we can look and see, okay, well, this is the current demand for these items, this is the current or goods and services that are being offered in the country, and therefore the government, sir, can make a policy decision about whether to increase or to decrease the level of taxes, duties, or whatever the case is, in the context of what is taking place across the board. And therefore, as a fiscally responsible government, the only way that we can do that effectively, sir, is through the provision of good data. And therefore, if persons are not providing the accurate information to the government, then regrettably, that could lead, sir, it could lead to a situation where the government does not have complete information. And if the government, and you really can't afford for the government not to have as close to complete information as possible. And therefore, the judgment with respect to the implementation of policy can be impaired, but of course, sir, what we do is to impute. So if we know that we only have 85% of the information, then we can do an imputation, sir, just to make sure that we have complete coverage. But the reality is, sir, that even within that context, the monitoring of policy is important, because we are always in a position we always want to be in a position to be able to respond to the true and accurate picture on the ground. So if you're bringing items into the country, they must be declared. And part of the reason that they must be declared as well is that government at any particular point in time, and this is not to trigger any alarm, Mr. Speaker, but government at any point in time, in order to take decisions at a national level strategically, particularly, sir, where there may be the potential for emergency, the government must be able to trust the data that, one, that we can glean from the department, but two, that with respect to the members of in the context of the entire private sector, that decisions can be taken in relation to what may be required to solve any particular problem. And therefore, data and information is critical, and we are working to, having done the Assecuda World component. There is a matter outstanding with respect to how we deal with warehousing and the examination of goods, which is part 9, sir. And I know that we still have some challenges there with respect to inventory management with respect to warehouses, but we're working on a solution to help to resolve that across the board as it relates to warehousing. But I think strategically, sir, we have made some progress on that front, but there's still some work to be done there within the context of warehousing. But the reality is, sir, that as we go through this process of modernizing the customs department, and I say so conscious that when we did Ascot World 2 years ago, I think we introduced the 2017 tariff, the harmonized system, the customs tariff, and for the benefit of through you, sir, to the youngsters, to the young visitors, sorry, the customs tariff is a very special document, and it is important to indicate that because it itemizes all of the products that up until that particular point in time have reached such volumes globally that they merit being identified individually, such that a country like Barbados can determine what is the level of duty that is applicable to each item. As I had stated earlier, sir, as you know, and perhaps the youngsters may or may not know, but a mobile phone for us, sir, has changed in our lifetime. As I'm sure that a mobile phone or the technology will change for these youngsters in their lifetime. Because you would remember, sir, back in the day that a mobile phone was as big as you remember those?
A phone booth.
So a mobile phone in the tariff 20 years ago is not the same as a mobile phone in the tariff today. And therefore, the customs tariff, which provides the clearest level of specificity about how products change over time based on the volumes globally within the context of whether it's agricultural goods, sir, whether it is manufactured goods. There's a whole range of detail within the context of the customs tariff. And every 5 years or so, the customs tariff actually changes to reflect the fact that there are new products that come into the market. But as new products come into the market, sir, you well know that some of the old ones go as well. And therefore, the customs tariff is a live document, really. And we try to make sure then that the tariff that is being applied in the country, meaning that when you bring your mobile phone, if you had brought your mobile phone, and certainly it didn't look like this 20 years ago, sir, that the tariff reflects the nature and the specificity of the specification, of the products that are involved, and therefore I'm very clear that come next year, if not early 2023, we should be in a position to implement the tariff for 2022, which is now being worked on to be rolled out. So I say that because as we have been reforming, sir, the public must come to the realization that reform means that you must keep pace, and therefore Barbados, as I said to our young visitors, Barbados must continue to lead and not find ourselves disadvantaged. Now, at the end of the day, with the the dynamics of products changing rapidly, then based on what is going on within the market, you set your tariffs according to what those demands are. The reality is, though, sir, within the context of CARICOM, we have agreed an agreed framework for how we will tax things, and therefore, oftentimes people forget that when you bring import goods from outside of the region, sir, extra-regional, outside of the region, sir, that there's a different tariff or a different tax, sir, for bringing items that are outside of the region in, simply because, sir, for CARICOM to work, we're trying to create a single market and economy, sir, and therefore you wouldn't expect the taxes that you apply with your friends, yeah, your friends, sir, would be worse than, in effect, persons that are not your friends. And I hope I'm communicating that clearly, sir, because it is important that when the members of the public see things on the internet, no matter what the value is, sir, and all of that, that where you bring something from determines the level of taxation that is applied to it. It ain't nothing that the customs officer do. It ain't nothing that any of us in here do, sir. This is an agreed framework within the context of CARICOM, and therefore customs, in exercising its one of its critical roles, is to try to determine the origin of specific goods, and I know that there's normally certification that will say this good came from X place, because the application of the tariff, sir, is important. So if you see something nice, sir, on Amazon, sir, or eBay, or wherever, and that same product, sir, is available in Trinidad or Guyana or any such place, sir, and two different people, one person brings the item from Trinidad, the other person brings the item from, let's say, Taiwan, sir, for example, Taiwan, might be the same price, might be. When it lands in Barbados, because there are different tariffs to be applied on the basis of where it comes from, sir, some people may say, well, the customs giving somebody an ease versus giving somebody a raw deal. That is not the case, because we have an agreed framework, sir, that says if we bring items from within the CARICOM region, that there is a lower tariff to be applied, import duty to be applied, than if it comes from somewhere outside of that framework. So I hope that, and I know that the department, it will be working on not just in terms of its reforms, but as far as communications are concerned, sir, because sometimes, you know, in these times, somebody could put something on social media, and before you hear the shout, sir, it got 5,000 views, and everybody creating the perception that the customs officers unfairing people. When in truth, in fact, sir, when you look at this, when you start to unpack it, it is not the case. But of course, you know, sir, when something gets out there, it is, you really can't get it back in a reasonable, you can't really get it back, sir, because people have formed a view, no matter how much you put the information into the public, that there's something wrong with the context of the administration of these matters. So the truth is, sir, the Customs Department will be continuing to engage with the public sector, with the private sector, but equally, sir, will have to educate, sir, if you like, much of this with the public. I know the Ministry of Foreign Trade has been engaging at certain level with respect to being able to bring some of this information into the public space, so that people don't just think or feel, sir, that somebody getting the ease when somebody else is as opposed to just following the rules. And that, sir, is absolutely critical and important to understand that where you source goods from will determine what is the level of duty that you pay. Now, unless there is a very specific agreement that says we will apply X tariff, sir, to these specific items, which generally speaking is something that is more done at a regional level anyhow, in the context of quoted, where depending on the circumstances of the region's ability to produce, then you may have a slightly different variation. But all of these things matter, sir, with respect to how customs will perform its duties and collect duties in that respect. So that has to be made and repeated, sir, for the benefit of all Barbadians, because we must all be on the same page with respect to what the Customs Department implements on all of our behalf. And therefore, I want to assure the public that there's nothing mysterious about either the customs tariff, which, as I said, defines the products, the goods globally based on their specifications. It also gives the amount of duty that is applicable. I know that there is a plugin on the Asakuda website that you can go on and put in a broad description, and you will get an approximation for what the duty calculation would be, as well as the VAT. But just bear in mind, sir, that where you get it from matters as well. And I cannot stress that, because it is how the government of Barbados, operating within the context of CARICOM, sir, that we are able to make sure that we are applying the rules as we have agreed to within the context of CARICOM. Because the truth is, sir, it would be disingenuous of any of our member states or for us to agree to something in one space and then let something through the back door, sir, which really is contrary to what we have agreed to. And Barbados has always taken a principled position that, one, we are pro-region. We want to work to enhance regional integration, as we have been trying to do for a very long time. And part of honoring that trade space is to ensure that we do right with respect to the application of the customs tariff and what we do in the context of trade regionally, sir. So that is absolutely important for the public to understand. Now, as you know, the Customs Department operates within the structure of the law, and therefore, one of the things that the benefit of upgrading to Asakuda world has meant that the data validation and the exercise within which the supply of information is critical means now that there is very little discretion either on the part of the officer or the customs broker. And I say so, sir, in the context of what I had described earlier about the reams of paper that were in customs offices. So within the context of the system now, sir, someone who's preparing a customs entry, they are required, sir, to submit the relevant information. Otherwise, you can't get further in the process. Now, imagine a scenario where you have thousands of reams of paper coming at you every day, sir. It's virtually impossible, one, for you to verify that all the information is relevant at that particular point in time and still be able to facilitate process. So when I speak to discretion, it is discretion in the context of the way the process is done, but by the same token, ensuring that the data quality and what is submitted, sir, Asakuda World now gives us the ability to do that, and with the integration, sir, of things like the daily exchange rate, the tariff is fully there, populated, such that what you declare, sir, the only thing with respect to a matter of discrepancy is that if your item is then selected for an examination on the basis of what the items may be, that the verification then in terms of what you have declared and what is in front of the customs officer is the thing that comes into consideration. Of course, they will always continue to be issues as it relates to classification, and we have been working certainly with the Chamber to have a mechanism to resolve issues of classification, because from time to time, sir, depending on what is going on, and that is why, as I said, you really can't linger with an old tariff for too long, because if you have an old tariff and products are constantly changing and changing as quickly as they are, then you will have more and more issues of more classification issues. And we saw that prior to the implementation of Excluder World, before we did the 2017 tariff, there were always conversations about classification. We've seen less of it now, but we are reaching the point now where, sir, when we update to the next tariff, just to make sure that those classification issues are relatively minor, because if we were to keep the 2017 tariff for another 5 years, then you will start to see issues of classification, because as more and more products start to come on stream globally and are traded, then the existing tariff simply would not reflect accurately some of those issues. So the effort within the department is to try to make sure that we stay up to date, in the same way, sir, that when you have upgrades of any of your computer systems or anything, sir, you upgrade. And you upgrade with the express purpose of being able to remain competitive, to remain relevant with respect to the industry stakeholders, and to avoid, sir, the acrimony that may arise because people feel as if you're unfairing them. So if you have an old tariff and people are bringing in products that are made in 2019 and 2020 and 2021, and you have a tariff that is 2005, which does not reflect that, then you can always have this kind of conflict between these types of things. So it is important that the government, through the Customs Department, maintains a strong relationship with members of the private sector. The Ministry of Foreign Trade has been working on their front to, within the context of WTO and the other UNCTAD and the other trade bodies, sir, to be able to bring the customs, the new tariffs into line, and to make sure that they are done, such that the Customs Department then is in a position to implement and to reduce any issues with respect to classification. Now, of course, sir, it also works the other way, because you and I, perhaps, sir, I'd say you and I are of the age now where we start talking about vintage, sir, and the extent to which things may be vintage for us. These young visitors here may want to know what it is that we are studying. But the truth is, sir, as the tariff evolves, there are often times where you might find a Austin, Cambridge somewhere, sir, that you want to retrofit, or Morris Minor, sir. And the reality is that those types of vehicles are no longer in the tariff because we have moved on. and the reality is, in finding those types of vintage, and I use that as an example because when you have to bring those things into the country, they're no longer within the context of the tariff because they're no longer in production globally or any such thing. They're no longer specifically in the tariff, and therefore there are always exceptions with respect to these things which customs can facilitate. And therefore, as I said, you can have issues of classification where, again, things may be discontinued for some time. People go on the internet and find something somewhere and bring them in, and then only come to realize that the current system does not have a specific place for them because they were taken out before. So the reality is that those are some issues, obviously, that the department will have the capacity still to be able to facilitate, but it will not be as straightforward as if the item that you're importing is in the context of the tariff. And that is why the issue of, and I come to it kind of indelicately, the issue of advanced rulings and these types of things which are being made provision for in the bill, in communication with customs, will give you the confidence that if you import if you were to import something that is not in the tariff, you get the opportunity to be able to get from customs what would be applicable with respect to that, so that there is certainty within the context of the process, so that you're not surprised when whatever it is that you're importing gets to the British port, and then, as we say, all hell breaks loose because nobody don't know what's going on. And therefore, the facilitation that we are seeking to achieve within the context of the reforms is to provide that framework such that persons can actively engage the customs department, get advanced rulings, certainty, let me put it that way, sir, certainty about what will be applicable if I bring in these items. If these items are not in the tariff, what will I have to pay with respect to this? Is it something that, and let me say, sir, that the other part of and I perhaps omitted to say, is that, as you know, sir, one of the first things we did when we came to office was to ban plastics. You recall the plastic ban with respect to that. So customs has a very important role to play, not just in that respect, but globally. As you know, sir, there are items that are prohibited to be traded. And therefore, customs is part of that mechanism for what we have agreed to, not just with respect to our plastic ban, the ban on plastics, but the wider enforcement of goods that are not intended to be traded. Customs has an important role to play with respect to that. So you can't just go and bring something into the country, and if it's on the ban list, because of course, sir, if I don't know that it is necessarily anything nefarious at all times, but if you have acquired something which is on a ban list and it arrives at the British port, and customs says to you, well, this is a banned substance, it cannot come into the country. Now, you've expended money, and regrettably, we have to dispose of it. So the enforcement that is required, customs has a very important role to play as it relates to these things. So I would say to the public, sir, that if you know that you are going to be importing items that are unusual, let's put it that way, please reach out to the customs department just to get clarity with respect to, one, what is the process, whether there are any issues from that front, because before you go and spend your money, sir, only to find that you can't have a return on that very investment, that please establish contact with the customs department to be able to determine whether it is possible or not. And that is not for, the customs department isn't necessarily interested, sir, in your business, and I want to indicate to the public that the government isn't here to try to tell you what business to get into. And we're not even so much concerned with your business, as we would say in Bajan parlance, sir. All we are required to know is how we can facilitate you in doing what you are doing, and that it is legal, it fits within the confines of what we have agreed to at a regional level, at an international level, so that before people go and spend money and come to and bring those items to the Bridgetown port, only then, sir, to be in a bit of distress because suddenly you can't dispose of these items in the way that you had intended to make some money from it, and therefore it is important that people make contact with respect to the customs department, check through the website or formally through conversations with the department officers themselves to be aware that what you are doing can meet muster, sir. And I say that in all sincerity, sir, because too often some people, not knowing what is and what isn't banned, sometimes may find themselves with items at the Bridgetown port and cannot dispose of them, and all because perhaps things have been discontinued or whatever in other jurisdictions. It appears to be a good deal because it is cheap. People are dumping things because they've come to the end of life, sir, or something wrong with them, or whatever it is. We find these things cheaply on the internet. We go and spend some money, we bring them in, and then when it lands, you're told they can't enter. So it is not that the Customs Department is trying to stop people from doing business or any such thing. They're just performing their role along with the other regulatory agencies to make sure that what reaches the public is sir, is safe and fit for whatever consumption that may be required. Sir, I come very quickly to part 11, which speaks to the calculation of customs value of goods. And I think I need to say this and put it in context, because in recent times we've been hearing in the public space some suggestions with respect to how customs should calculate duties and all of these things, sir. Now, sir, I will just take a couple minutes to explain what used to happen, sir. What is the law? What is customary? And how we move forward. Now, sir, globally, sir, customs duties have always been calculated on the basis of cost, sir, insurance, and freight. And it is on that basis, sir, that customs duties have, as it relates to imports, sir, have always been calculated or intended to be calculated. If you're exporting something, sir, there's something it's called free on board, which is the other side with respect to the process. But for the purpose of this discussion, sir, I will focus on the determination of the customs value. Now, earlier when I spoke to Asecuda++, sir, and discretion, the process allowed for persons not to input the freight component of the cost in the determination of customs value, and therefore what crept in was perhaps an understanding, sir, that you only assessed the provision of duty on the basis of the cost. Now, that was an unfortunate development, sir, because most importers know that even if I, sir, made a purchase to import items, I have to pay to get it here, sir, and I also have to get insurance for the most part. Some people do get insurance, some don't. And the cost that is passed on to the consumer, sir, is not the cost at which you acquired the item at, but the cost for which you have incurred to get it here, and then obviously on to the consumer. And the pricing of what the final consumer normally would see incorporates all of those costs. Sorry. And therefore, if you see something, and it's important to explain to our young visitors that you can go on Amazon or any marketplace that is online outside of Barbados, and you can see items priced at a particular point, sir. Price point. Now, within the context of those jurisdictions, they have manufacturing capability, there's economies of scale, and all of those things. So, for example, sir, if you see something priced on Amazon in New York, Ohio, Los Angeles, wherever the jurisdiction of the seller, you may see something priced on Amazon, sir, for $40. But you see that same item, sir, perhaps here in Barbados for $100. And people say, well, it's a deal because they can get it on Amazon for $40, right? Now, the truth is, sir, if you buy it on Amazon, you got to pay cost to get it here, right? And then in getting it here, obviously it goes through the customs clearance. And so you see things on social media about customs charge me this, charge me that. And I understand, sir, the anxiety that persons may feel that customs is unfair to them. They're not, but they may feel so. Because as I said, sir, if you, and I think garments is a particular example, sir. We have an arrangement in place that says if you bring garments from outside of the sub-region, sir, that there's a specific tariff applied to shirts and these types of things, sir, that's CARICOM, sir. That's not Barbados, that is CARICOM. So here's the thing, sir. If you go into Bridgetown, I'm not here to defend the private sector, I'm just explaining through you, sir, to our young visitors in the rest of the country, that if you buy a singular item on Amazon and bring it in and apply the tariff to that based on where the origin is, sir, I remember I went through that earlier, based on the origin of the item, there's a different tariff applied. Now, you may very well see that you go into a store in town, and as I said, it might cost $100 in town. Why does it cost $100 in town, sir? Because the scale within which they have been able to bring those items in, pay the duty, sir, get them here, affords them the opportunity, sir, at the unit level to move from what you see on Amazon as $40, sir, to $100 on the basis of being able to bring those items in, pay the appropriate duties with scale, and still make a little margin and sell it for $100. Now, it is important to understand, sir, the cost of things. So when you pay $40 on Amazon and then pay FedEx or somebody, whoever shipping it, $80, $100, whatever it is, the cost of that item, sir, is actually now $140, the cost. So this is not for me to advocate that you need to go into town to buy stuff. I'm just saying, explain it to people, sir, that how you choose to acquire goods and come into the country is subject to certain rules of importation. And therefore, within the context of the operations of retail in Bridgetown versus if you choose individually to go and make a purchase for which the origin of the item, because you see something in the United States does not mean that it is made in the United States either. And therefore, even if you think you're buying it from the United States, it is actually made somewhere else. And therefore, you have to recognize that based on our structure of how tariffs are applied and based on where goods originate, there is a specific tariff based on the origin, based on all of our arrangements that determines, Mr. Speaker, what is charged. And rather, I know that people may be surprised by that, but there are good reasons for that. Because you will recall, sir, that whether it is the protection of the garment industry, whether it is the development of the very said cotton industry, sir, that we have been working on for many years, it is a regime that unless there is a policy shift away from that regime, sir, this is what is in place at the moment, and the Customs Department is only applying that which it is to operate from. So I say that for what it is worth, sir, because the calculation of duties is on the basis of a CIF basis, and that is how the government of Barbados is able to help to finance, sir, the provision of services across the country, and certainly in the context of a COVID environment where we've had to give more and more resources to respond to the public health pandemic. We've also had to expend money, sir, to assist many of our young students to be able to access online learning, which is something that the Ministry of Education has been working through. And I say that because the revenue structure for which the country is being managed, goods that come through any port of entry are assessed on the basis of cost, insurance, and freight, sir. That is not to say that another measure could not work. But I say that in the context that another measure that seeks to reduce the revenue that we collect from the Customs Department, sir, would only mean that some other measure of taxation would have to come into play, sir, in order to fill the gap. And it is just the reality. Is either that or we cut some provision of some good or service to be able to compensate. So the thrust that we are trying to focus on here with respect to the modernization of customs is, and I accept, sir, that yes, we have seen in the last year and a half increases in global commodity prices and a whole range of costs that have been increased because of the disruption in the global supply chain. And yes, in the short term, sir, there may be some issues that we can resolve with respect to whether we cap the freight or what have you. But I can say that based on the information that I have seen to date from customs as it relates to the per kilogram freight cost, sir, we have not necessarily seen the increase in the per kilogram freight costs that have been cited as consistently as that is considerably different, sir, from the pre-pandemic level. And that is just, sir, from looking across the range of products that have been imported, and we are monitoring the situation very carefully to see how the government can respond, but we have to mine the data, and we continue to mine the data with respect to that. But I felt it was important, sir, that I provide some level of clarity to the fact that CAF is the basis for which all countries across the world, sir, pretty much calculate the customs duties. And we can, sir, as I said, on the basis of the provision of the appropriate data and declarations, see whether or not there is some scope with respect to being able to help to deal with the cost of items to the customer. But let me indicate, sir, that whilst the government can perhaps look at a temporary cap with respect to freight costs, it does not take away from the fact that the importer had indeed to pay those freight costs. And whilst I know that we have been working, sir, to get the economy reopened, you know, sir, that from yesterday the curfew has gone back to midnight. That will provide some measure of relief. But because globally, sir, costs in the short term because of the disruption have gone up across the board, the capacity for government to absorb, or even the capacity for the government to absorb is contingent, sir, on the amount of revenue that we're capable of collecting within the context of the COVID environment. And therefore, one of the reasons that we are given the level of vaccination, one of the reasons that we are confident that we can see our way through to a relatively accelerated recovery, sir, is that once we can reach those thresholds we are confident, sir, that the reopening of the economy, just like customs and the other agencies have to deal with elements of risk management in protecting the public, our level of vaccination, sir, is that bridge, if you like, that will give some element of balance, sir, with respect to how we are able to reopen the economy and as well as to keep people safe. And this government, sir, has, whether it is the customs and the other agencies who have been working as regulatory agents to keep Barbados safe in terms of what comes into the country, we equally have to make sure that we are able to save lives, sir, as well as to maintain livelihoods. And that balance, sir, is a very delicate one. So the calculation of the customs duty, sir, is on the basis of cost, insurance, and freight. And to the extent that that can change is not necessarily likely, sir, given that the ability for the government to be able to help finance a lot of the public provisioning would be impacted. Parts 12, sir, speaks to the origin of goods and tariff classification. I touched on that because equally, sir, as I said, notwithstanding the actual tariff to be applied, where you get the goods from obviously impacts that. Now, I'm looking, sir, the section for the trusted trader, and let me find it here, just to say a bit on that. Part 16, sir. Part 16. So one of the innovations that we have introduced, sir, with the reforms of the Customs Department is what is known as, what some may regard as the Trusted Trader Program. But there are two elements to this that we are seeking to introduce, sir, because it is critically important that we recognize where we are going strategically. And I made reference to this before. So the department has piloted, sir, the Trusted Trader Program from 2019, and it is intended, sir, to look in the same way that, for example, we have had the Revenue Authority look at the large taxpayer unit to focus on efficiency. The Trusted Trader Program is designed specifically to be able to look at how the larger importers are performing, assess them, and then see how then we can expand the program, sir, to be able to make it easier for everybody to participate. Now, I say that not to give anything to the public that will suggest that there's a small man, big man type of focus. The reality is, sir, is that our revenue is contingent on whether it is in terms of the BRA, the large taxpayer unit is designed to make sure that every month those taxpayers that represent more than 75% or so of our revenue every month, sir, that we're able to have a very clear focus about efficiency with respect to those entities so that the service delivery can continue as smoothly as possible, whilst at the same time, as I said, sir, we are seeking to expand. So the Trusted Trader Program, sir, started with 23 companies to participate in the process, and the program has gone quite well, sir, in the context of, well, obviously in the middle of it, COVID intervened. So the assessment that is being done is really now just to see how quickly we can roll that out to the rest of the business community. But the reality is, sir, is that based on trust, and the key thing here is trust, sir. And I said earlier that we will trust, but we have to verify. So we are moving away from a case of, in the past, where everything had to be examined. And as I mentioned, sir, and I say this in the context that we have improved our scanning infrastructure and those types of things from a security perspective. And to the extent that the intelligence of the department supports it, that these programs are designed to enhance business and trade facilitation, and to allow for greater efficiency, and ultimately, sir, to deal with some of the associated costs that perhaps are passed on to the consumer. And that is important, and that is an important objective. So as we have assessed the program, which will give certain, I don't like using the word benefits, but it gives those under the pilot an opportunity to see how the facilitation would work, give feedback certainly to the customs department. The customs department then can tweak to make sure then that what is being implemented will actually make sense for Barbados, such that we are able to see information plus goods properly screened through the Bridgetown port and going to any other jurisdiction in Barbados, and be able, sir, to get on the shelves wherever people may get them in a time that does not add costs, sir, to the overall to the process. And in fact, that government then gets the revenue that it's supposed to get, because the information is properly presented, assessed, and we're able to do things quickly without any variation with respect to issues related to security. And I say that because that has been top of mind with respect to this administration and being able to deal with it. So the provisions here, sir, give the legislative footing for what we've been able to pilot so far and work out some of the kinks, sir. But what is critical to understand the difference between the trusted trader and the authorized economic operator is simply this, sir. The designation as an authorized economic operator, sir, is a global designation. The trusted trader is effectively a local program to deal with how we will facilitate companies bringing items in, but also eventually items that are being exported. So here's the thing. If, as you know, sir, we are operating in a global network, and to the extent that you may be a trusted trader in Barbados, which means if you're just importing items, sir, then you're supporting documentation, all that facilitates that you meet the criteria outlined with respect to participating in the program. When we monitor, we realize that you have been compliant with respect to the program and you can continue to function. That is not the same thing as a company, for example, sir, that may very well be involved in logistics, whether in Miami, in London, Barbados, Trinidad. So your company, like, I'm not. We have a few companies that have a very regional presence, sir. I won't call names for fear of wanting to advertise, but the point is we have companies in Barbados that operate in about 17 different countries in the sub-region. So the idea of becoming an authorized economic operator is that if you are moving goods around the sub-region, for example, and you have that designation which is accredited, obviously, across the network, then your ability to move goods across the space is much more seamless than if you're just a trusted trader operating within the context of the domestic space. And that difference makes it has a significant impact, sir, on the cost of doing business. And therefore, we want to say to our business community that in the same way that we have been focused on and you have agitated to get the process improved to bring stuff in. When I said earlier, sir, that we now have to focus on how we're going to export and get things out and moved around such that we can become a transshipment hub, but equally Barbadian goods are being exported, that we really need persons to be in a position in a few years to graduate from just the regular trusted trader program, which is, yes, designed to give greater facilitation, and once the assessment is completed, we will then be able in a position to roll out and monitor, because, sir, we have been clear. If there will be no, there can't be none the ball, sir, you can't march the crease, because we give these benefits on the basis of being able to trust, because the deployment of the resources within the context of the Customs Department, we want to focus a lot on compliance, as I said earlier, be able to facilitate trade and doing business, such that, as I said, the public, government, that we can be assured of the security as well as the revenue measures, and that the private sector can be assured of their ability to operate in an environment where there is fair competition, and that there's a level of sharing of information between the Customs Department as well as the wider stakeholders. But getting that designation, sir, is going to be important if Barbados is going to realize. So when I say getting that designation, companies, entities operating within the logistics space, getting the designation as a authorized economic operator will make a difference. It makes a difference to the cost of doing business. Moving goods from wherever in the world to Barbados, or moving goods from Barbados to wherever in the world. It makes a difference. And therefore, whilst we have put these reforms in place to try to make it easier for people to do business, it really means that if we are going to live up to the vision and to execute the vision, that our private sector, sir, some of the players have to now be in a position to secure whatever financing is required, improve the productive capacity, be able to get goods out, produced and out into the marketplace, such that we are able now to use logistics now, sir, in the same way that we hope that with the not just investment in RE, but also some of the other opportunities in relation to open up markets across Latin America as well as Africa for goods to go from Barbados, or to establish interest in those jurisdictions and to boost the capacity. That the reality is now that we need to use logistics, sir. We need to use logistics as another pillar upon which we can earn revenue for the country, and be in a position then to see that our consumers can benefit with respect to the fact that the increased processing time with respect to the clearance of items actually can result in pricing to the public that is beneficial. But the more important part is to really drive the economic activity within the context of the domestic space, and driving that activity means that we have to become much more export-oriented, and becoming much more export-oriented is really additional activity will come, the growth will come within the context of being able to do that. And this section, sir, is an important section. It may appear short in the context of the bill, but it is really about how do we reposition the logistics sector within Barbados to be able to achieve those couple of things. So the department, as I said, has started the pilot. It's going reasonably well. COVID, obviously, sir, has had some impact on it, because obviously you've had disruption with respect to literally get containers. So if you can't get a container, sir, then you can't get your goods moved. If you know the ship was in the middle of the Suez Canal, sir, for a few days, and that completely confused the whole thing. So when you start thinking about processing time and lead time and all these things, sir, clearly disrupted, but obviously the intent of the program is to see how best we can facilitate as much activity within the context of the domestic logistical sector. But equally, sir, it is only possible if on the other side we're able to boost the productive capacity. And I do know that the member for St. Philip South is working on that SPS legislation, sir. And I know that that too, coupled with a couple of other critical pieces of legislation, would create the framework where our export capacity is enhanced, and therefore, whether it's agriculture or manufactured goods and the like, that I believe, sir, the next few years will put us in a position where we will start to see increases in those things happening, and therefore the Customs Department stands ready as it is now, sir, to be able to help facilitate greater exports, and we will work, sir, with the various stakeholders to provide the various pieces of information to ensure that we can get those things done. Now, sir, I spoke a little bit about the post-clearance audit. And it's interesting, sir, because the brief that I remember when we started this process, I think there was one officer in the post-clearance audit, I think 2 years ago, maybe two. I think there were 1 or 2 officers in the post-clearance audit 2 years ago, sir. I think when we started this process, and obviously we didn't make the transition because there was still paper and a whole set of other things going on, sir. And so with the introduction of Asekuda World, we've now been able to change that. Now, the report, the brief that I see here, sir, is the unit now conducts on average 513 desk audits on a monthly basis, sir. So you would appreciate, sir, that the substantive difference and improvement with respect to that process to ensure then that once you've facilitated on the entry side, that you affirm that the information is indeed correct. And as I said, in the process of monitoring to mine the data as well, to be able to determine the quantum with respect to if there's any differentials to be made up. It's still ongoing, but we are satisfied, sir, sufficiently that there is a healthy level of compliance within the system already. So in formalizing these arrangements within the context of the Trusted Trader program, and perhaps persons being given a designation at some point in the future, sir, as an authorized economic operator, we are confident that with the right perspective from the private sector, that we should be in a position, sir, and knock on wood, shortly really to put Barbados in a position to become that transshipment hub that we have spoken about for ages, sir. And I know that the member for St. Michael South, sir, as you are aware, the debate started in this chamber on the FAL bill, and as it relates to maritime. So the public would see that the government has been putting the pieces of the puzzle, sir, in the right place. And therefore we are working as in parallel, if you like, as we should do. We've had some disruption, but the puzzle pieces, sir, are falling into place, not just legislatively, but certainly the infrastructure being placed within the context of the departments and the support with respect to staffing and the like, sir, which, because of COVID, we've had to divert resources to deal with the pandemic, and therefore we've had to pull back a little bit on some of that. But as we transition now, sir, to get back to normality, it becomes, sir, front and center with respect to accelerating the recovery. And it is no mean feat, sir, that not just the Customs Department, but certainly the work being done with the Bridgetown Port, as well as the other government agencies within the context of the single market, sir, will allow us to be able to literally change the dynamic for Barbados and move out of the position where there was little or no activity, sir, with respect to progress in any of these spaces. The work certainly is not done yet. I've said to the controller and the others, you certainly have my full support with respect to implementing the reforms. I really, sir, want to thank UNCTAD as well as the International Monetary Fund, who, sir, as part of our support for the technical assistance, we have had a consultant, and I say so for the member for St. Michael West to hear very clearly. Yes, we have had a consultant who for the last 2 years have been working with the Customs Department through technical assistance provided, sir, by the Government of Canada, and I thank them in this place formally, to be able to help reshape and give support to the Customs Department where it was needed most. So without UNCTAD and certainly the support of the Government of Canada, we really would not have been here fast enough to be able to bring these reforms to fruition. And the reality is that as the controller and his senior staff are working to get things implemented, Mr. Speaker, we have had obviously to make sure that we have the additional support from a technical perspective to help train and change the culture of the organization, sir, because at the end of the day, if you don't address substantively how people work and the way that they see themselves as part of the process, I'm confident that we have made some progress. There is more training certainly to be done in that vein, sir, because the demands of the Customs Department from a data perspective, as we've been collecting more and more data that's being provided to the department, means that the Customs Department of the future and the personnel within the Customs Department going forward, sir, with their experience, with the supporting data, I'm very confident, sir, we'll be in a position to do right by Barbadians and allow for us to be able to respond more proactively to the issues of the private sector. But we are very clear that our mission as government now is not just to look at what is the status quo, but to try to change that status quo, sir, to be able to reflect a much more export-oriented focus, such that the work of the Customs Department will become, well, routine, if you like, relatively routine, sir, and that only where there are specific challenges that the engagement with respect to the Customs Department then would be required, because the building of those relationships, sir, to ensure there's always constant communication with the stakeholders. The setting of standard operating procedures, sir, will become a feature of how the Customs Department will operate, and therefore it is something that we will continue to monitor, sir, as time goes on. As Chapter 20, Part 23, sir, speaks to the duty-free, the broad structure for the framework to allow for duty-free zones, and that in the context of being able to deal with, I know that you shouldn't say, but our policy of being able to create zones where the activities are very specific and focused and of an innovative perspective. It is intended that this section, along with what will come a little later, sir, will help us to be able to build out those types of activities, such that, as I say, sir, the focus on exports is really part of how Barbados will recover going forward. So that section, sir, speaks to broadly about some of the operations in relation to that. The other sections of the bill, sir, speaks to specific powers and obligations of the customs officers, because we have been working, sir, to create a new ethos, if you like, within the customs department, so officers see it as it is a profession, sir. There's really very little other like it within the context of customs, and therefore this is something that is very, very clear for us to establish, because to whom much is given, sir, much is expected. And this section of the bill spells out quite clearly where what the powers are with respect to customs officers, and it is not only in relation to the powers to search and do these things. Those are routine things which, within the context of law enforcement, would be expected. But one of the critical things that we are working through, sir, is the code of conduct with respect to that of not just customs officers, but persons that operate within the space of customs and of customs control areas, and therefore it is instructive that the accountability, sir, that is required not just for personnel of customs, but of all the persons working within the context of any space that within any space that have been designated as a customs control area, that we will establish very clearly, sir, what are the rules and regulations with respect to anybody who is operating within that space. And so, sir, this, I believe, is a start with respect to one of the very critical things in relation to the modernization of customs. The public, and really and truly, sir, it is a big bill. And the task of the Customs Department and the GIS now will be to break this up, break it down, and make it as user-friendly as possible, such that, and I said at the beginning, sir, I know most people just want to know how quickly they can get the items out of the out of the port. And let me say that we know that certainly over the last 3 weeks that we have seen a 50% increase in the arrival of packages in the country, and the controller has already dispatched additional personnel to be able to deal with that. But I will be meeting tomorrow, sir, with the operators as we move into this Yuletide season, sir, to ensure that they too are stepping up to the plate to facilitate the process with respect to persons getting their items. I'm very clear in my mind, sir, that we have gone through a very serious year, and the extent to which we can make our Yuletide season, sir, as pleasant as we possibly could. It is important that we when we meet with them, that they share with us, sir, their plans for how they will operate, certainly over the next few weeks, to allow for a seamless process as possible. And just be mindful, sir, that because persons are not traveling in the way that they will normally travel, we have seen an extraordinary increase with respect to the arrival of those packages. And we are absolutely clear in our mind, sir, that whilst the department has been as proactive as they can in the context of responding to those specific challenges, that whilst this is a matter that I know has engaged members of the public, we are clear that the Customs Department has done what they can do from their perspective, sir, to be able to help clear items. And we will be meeting certainly with the operators to see what it is they are doing within their own specific internal procedures, to see how best we can unlock a lot of the backlog that certainly has emanated. The reality is, sir, that until we are able, and I say we, the entire network of persons involved in the logistical trade are able to respond to the demands, sir, and they have been able to at least facilitate the storage of those items, but literally getting the various entries prepared such that the Customs Department and the officers can respond. We'll be meeting with them, sir, just to make sure that they have put the resources in place with respect to being able to solve that specific issue, such that we are able to satisfy the concerns of some Barbadians. And so, sir, this bill, as I said, is part of an overarching framework to reform the Customs Department. I thank the officers again for their perseverance. It has taken some time for it to get here, and we are confident, sir, that not just with this framework, but with the other reforms that are being implemented by other ministries and departments, that this moving into 2022 and beyond, that we are repositioning Barbados to be able to literally take advantage of opportunities, and therefore creating the environment for investment, creating the environment for facilitation, creating an environment of trust, sir, such that we can efficiently deploy our officers and the resources as best we can, I believe, sir, will redound to the long-term benefit of the country. It is not without acknowledging that there are not always every instance where making representation may result in the decision that you desire. And I say so, sir, conscious that the establishment of that internal administrative process, the establishment, sir, of the Customs Appeal Tribunal, are options that will be made available to persons to be able to resolve any specific conflict within the administration of this bill, and that persons can feel confident that either at the level of the controller and his staff, that they can get meaningful resolution to a problem. If they're not satisfied with what has been resolved at that level, sir, then the provision with respect to the appeals tribunal is there for them to be able to seek resolution, sir. And we hope that with those two mechanisms in place, sir, that persons may be satisfied and may not feel that they need to go to court to be able to resolve a matter with customs. So we believe that with those two specific interventions to be put in place to deal with any administrative matters, but certainly to have an appellate mechanism to review that in the context of the customs bill, is important to improving the transparency as well as the accountability with respect to the Customs Department. And so, sir, I am happy to have been able to share a few thoughts this morning with the Chamber on the work that continues really to be done in the Customs Department. It is really a human task, because those 41 items of reform would ordinarily take, sir, a Customs Department 15 years to do. And we are trying to do it, sir, in the context of a 3 to 4 year program. And as ambitious, sir, as it is required for the government to get out of a situation that we found ourselves in because of a lack of implementation. We have to accelerate as much as possible the timelines. The private sector will effectively, sir, have to keep pace with respect to the reforms that are being implemented. It is a lot of change. Change is disruptive, sir, and I know that our capacity to respond is really there within us to do, because to not implement these reforms, sir, would be to the detriment of Barbados. And as long as I have breath, sir, and responsibility for being able to deal with this area, then I am confident that we will implement these reform measures. The department will be able to effectively respond to the concerns that have been raised by the private sector, which we have addressed and will continue to address, and give the confidence to the country, sir, that when it comes to security, that the Customs Department is doing its job. When it comes to the protection and collection of revenue, that the Customs Department is doing its job, sir. And when it comes to respect to business and trade facilitation, that the department, in deploying its resources, have been able to respond to these challenges, and that with the other implementations the other pieces of legislation and systems to be put in place, sir, that customs, the wider public sector, the government at large, sir, would be in a position to say that we have responded, we've made the investments, and it is now time for the private sector, sir, to be able to streamline their processes as we are streamlining ours, to be able to ensure that the service to the public is enhanced, but that the country is in a position, sir, to pivot and focus more on exports and allow for all of us, sir, to be able to deliver a better life for all of our people. And with those very few words, sir, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will indicate to the honourable member what a few short words are by indicating to the House that I would like to move the suspension of the sitting until 2:20 p.m.
What time, honorable member? The question is that this honorable chairman be suspended until 2:20 p.m. All the honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chairman stands suspended until 2:20 p.m.